get going, I wanted to invite Representative Barnard up here. She is ranking on the House Energy,
Technology,
all kinds of different things. Rep. Barnard, why don't you come up here and you can kind of give us a little update, maybe a little pep talk, a little.
Well, first I just want to thank the chamber. We started this Kitlo series of I don't know, over a year ago.
About that.
And we've had, this is our fifth meeting of this series, the Kitlo series. Keeping the lights on is what Kitlo stands for. And this is just a part of a piece of that larger vision. So I'm so grateful for the chamber. This is a huge undertaking and thankful for the panelists. And I know each one of you. And I'm grateful for all the work you do in your space. Thank you, PNNL, for coming out and for the efforts you've done in research for data centers. So with Microsoft, Sadie, and of course, Matt, representing labor. So thank you so much for being here and for the great turnout today. I'm really excited to learn as the ranking member on the Technology, Economic Development, and Veterans Committee. It is a huge undertaking and also a member of the Energy and Environment Committee. It's a huge undertaking to get all the facts to help make decisions on the future of data centers in Washington State. So that's what we're here for today, fact-finding mission, and I really look forward to hearing from all of you. Thanks so much for having us.
All right, thank you, Representative Barnard. So a little bit about the agenda. So we are going to hear from a representative of PNNL, and I'm not going to leave this up in front of everybody's face. The QR code for the PNNL study is all over the place in the back, up front. I'll put this over here out of the way. So if you want to take a look at the PNNL study, they did I downloaded it. It's like 90 some odd pages on the work that they've done looking into this, the experts. Then we are also going to hear a little bit of background data for the centers in Central Washington. Talk about the development and community impact of data centers, the economic impact of data centers, and then one of the big things is the energy requirements of data centers. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and then I've got a few questions, and then time allows, we'll go ahead and get some questions from other folks. So I'm going to start out, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to do the bios kind of in order. So I'm going to start out with PNNL. So we're going to start with PNNL. And I've got, and I'm gonna, you can all read his name up there on the front, but it is Srinivas. There you go. And I'm not even going to attempt his last name. Okay. But anyways, he is a laboratory fellow and a senior staff scientist at Pacific Northwest National Labs, holding a master's and PhD degrees in mechanical engineering from Texas A&M University. With over 30 years of experience, he studies energy efficiency in building and ways that buildings can work with the electrical grid. He recently contributed to the AI data center energy performance framework, focusing specifically on data center energy use and grid integration. So we're going to start over there on the side, and I'm hoping that maybe I'm going to, you can tell us a little bit about this study, why this study, why now for this study, and what its implications might be.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Although Matt told that it is a PNNL framework, it's not. It is a joint collaborative effort with three organizations that came together: American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning, and then National Electrical Manufacturers Association. And 50 other companies that were part of either NEMA or ASHRAE came together to develop this framework. So we coordinated the framework, and I contributed to one of the 10 sections, but it is a framework that is way beyond NEMA. Right? So the framework is intended to provide, I'm going to give you a little bit overview of the framework goals and the scopes and the intended audience, and then as we go along, we can expand on that. So the framework is intended to provide a common coordinated approach for designing and operating facilities for AI workloads. And the reason they thought it was important now to do this is because, why we're all here, right? There are lots surrounding, how to do that and what resources it would need and all of that. So the key goals of the framework is basically to identify infrastructure needs created by AI. Particularly these high-density computing, accelerated servers, and rapidly changing hardware. Things are changing so rapidly in this space. So bringing together different parts of this data center ecosystem, the framework includes people who are from IT manufacturers, data center owners, operator designers, utilities, of course, and then standards organization. So they all came together to draft this that could support reliable, resilient, and scalable data centers that adapt to AI technologies. And the reason they need to adapt is because the technology is changing so rapidly that if you don't adapt, then your data center will be obsolete the day it is built. So all of those are in the framework. And then the focus is also to improve energy and water efficiency while addressing significant power and heat loads associated with AI. So these are, the power densities of the AI data centers are significantly greater than the data centers that we have seen in the past. Data centers are not new. They've been here for a long time, but those past data centers don't have the power densities that the current data centers have. And then finally, to establish a common terminology and a shared roadmap for the industry. So the framework, the scope of the framework is pretty broad. As I said, I contributed to one section. There are 10 sections. And then it looks at lifecycle based view for the data centers. It considers issues from chips, servers, racks, and then the data halls, the levels through which through the building, and then utility connections and supporting infrastructure. And some of the topics that the framework talks about is high density computing and rack designs, electrical power generation, distribution and capacity, air, liquid, and hybrid cooling. And as I said, the older data centers were all air cooled. Those air cooled technologies won't work in this new data center world. So you need liquid cooled. And then in some cases, you can do a hybrid between air and liquid. And then thermal management of the environmental conditions. There's a section on that. Controls, monitoring, and operation. That is critical. And we'll get into that. And my contribution was to that section. And then reliability, resiliency, safety, and maintainability. So these are all issues. Safety is critical because these power densities are so high that if you're not trained in dealing with those kinds of power densities, when you're doing a repair on the servers, it becomes significant. So safety is also one of the key goals or scopes that's the framing. So energy, water, I'm sure we'll talk more about that, and overall sustainability of the data centers. So design, construction, commissioning, operation, upgrades, and retrofit. So retrofit is critical because, as I said, the technology is so changing so rapidly that if we don't design them such that they can be upgraded, they become obsolete the day they're built. So it is, in terms of the framework, but you can best understand that as a strategy and coordinated framework rather than a single prescriptive standard. It doesn't tell you it doesn't tell you what to do. It basically gives you several options, pros and cons of each option, and then the designers have to decide which approach they would take depending on the location needs, resource needs, resource availability, and all of that. And then finally, its purpose is to help stakeholders understand interconnected challenges So there is interconnection between water and energy. We'll talk about that later. And then AI facilities and guide the development and application of more detailed standards, practices, and solutions. So that's in a nutshell what the framework is. There were 50 different companies that contributed, probably over 100 people who authored them. And not everyone is an expert in all 10 sections. As I said, my expertise is in buildings and building controls and integration of buildings with the grid. And I contributed to that section. So I'll be glad to answer questions that are not related to what I did, but I'll do my best of answering any questions that might come up.
Thank you. So I think we can all agree and recognize the fact that PNNL and all the national labs play a critical role in the development and exploration of new technologies, new ideas, things like that. And so I think in preparation for this, I've done a lot of research on this, and I think that the PNNL report is probably one of the most comprehensive reports on the subject, and it's something that can be held up as a piece of work from a science-based aspect, from a neutral-based aspect, and it is hopefully it's something that you'll all get an opportunity to read. It's light reading, 10 sections, 90 some odd pages. But if you get a chance to take a look at it, because you will find that they did talk about options. There is no one size fits all. You can read about data centers back east, and you can read about data centers, and we'll hear about data centers here in Washington State. So thank you. And
one other thing I forgot to mention is this is a living document, and we are already talking about. There's a meeting next month among authors to talk about how we would keep up with the technology and update the framework. So, we may be a couple of months behind the technology, but if you go out there often, you'll see that there are changes to the framework from what you've seen in the past.
You mean technology is evolving rapidly? Yeah, as soon as they printed it, it was probably obsolete.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're going to move on to the couple of the other subjects. And so I am going to go over the bios of the rest of our panel here real quick. And we're going to start in the middle with Matthew Hebner. Matthew is an East Wenatchee City Councilman. I'm an executive director of the Certified Electricians Workers of Washington, representing 12,000 IBEW workers statewide. As a Marine veteran and journeyman electrician, he has represented electrical workers in the state legislature on energy policy and infrastructure matters. With experience in electrical systems, budget management, energy industry stakeholder relations, he focuses on practical solutions that balance economic opportunity with community interests. His background gives him insight into both the technical requirements of data centers and the policy considerations for responsible resource management. Thanks, Matthew. And then we've got Ryan. Ryan here, he is the Vice President of Revenue West for Sabey Data Centers, where he has helped support the company's growth across Western United States since joining Sabey in 2011. That was 15 years ago. Indeed. During his nearly 15 years, that's what it says here, with Sabey, Ryan has experienced the rapid evolution of data center industries and is passionate about helping communities understand the growing role digital infrastructure plays in driving economic development, innovation, and services people rely on every day. Before joining Sabey, Ryan served in the U.S. Navy nuclear power program aboard aircraft carriers, an experience that shaped his commitment to operational excellence and leadership. Ryan also serves on the boards of the Grant County Industrial Alliance and SkillSource Wenatchee, where he supports regional economic development and workforce initiatives. Welcome.
Thank you, Matt. I'm not technically a data center salesman, but I'm kind of a data center salesman.
Technically, no. And then last we have Lisa on the far end there. She was born and raised on a farm in Othello, Washington, and has called Quincy home for the last 36 years. Based in Quincy, Lisa has past 8 years with Microsoft as the Senior Community Engagement Manager for Eastern Washington, where she also helps lead the implementation of Microsoft's TechSpark program in North Central Washington. Prior to Microsoft, she spent 10 years at Yahoo as a global community outreach specialist for data center operations team. Earlier in her career, Lisa served for 7 years as executive director of the Quincy Valley Chamber of Commerce. Lisa is deeply committed to giving back and has shared her time and leadership with several local boards and committees, including the North Central Regional Library Board, the Quincy Valley Chamber Board, the Quincy Valley Livestock Committee. She currently serves as a Grant County Industrial Alliance Board and the Grant County Economic Development Board and the NCW. What's that stand for?
NCW Tech Alliance.
What's NCW stand for?
North Central Washington.
North Central Washington. There we go. Tech Alliance Board. Lisa and her husband Kent live in Quincy, where they farm alongside 2 of their 3 adult sons, growing apples, cherries, pears, hay, corn, and beans. So welcome. Thank you guys for coming. This is a panel of people that have been involved in data centers in one way or another. I guess we could say 20 years, right? Everybody here has been in it about 20 years? Okay, great. So first off, I want to talk about the history and operations of data centers in Central Washington. And I'm going to start with Lisa. Lisa, in previous conversations, you say you've been in the data center field for 20 years. How have they grown or evolved over those years? From when would that be? 2006?
2006. So, again, I'm not your technical person, so let's make that very clear right now. I don't know how to turn the lights on. I don't know how to program. And I'm like not even close to doing stuff that he over here is doing. But I do know the industry from representing the industry and being on the front end. I mean, I before I get into how they were built, I served on the EDC, the Grant County Economic Development Council, back in like 2002, and I remember us looking at the Grant County area and like, what can we bring here? Like, what do we have? I mean, farming was kind of, just kind of flat at that time. And it was like, I remember us doing an asset mapping project at the time and thinking, what do we have here that maybe would be attractive? We had some fiber that was being built out. We had, power, flat land, all these things that are kind of attractive. And it was like, can we think about going after those things? Fast forward, with my work at the chamber, I remember, start getting phone calls from people asking me all these really kind of different questions, like, what kind of hotels do you have in town? Do you have RVs, camp spots? And I was like, this is really interesting. It was before they'd really announced. It was people doing their work, trying to prepare for this mega workforce that ended up coming. And then the next thing we know, it was announced. This was back in the days, like I can tell you now, Microsoft does not require NDAs. We used to. I mean, everybody did that back in the days, is they would come in incognito as a different, Project Columbia or Project Cowbell or whatever it was. And so you didn't know. And then I can remember them announcing that, hey, Microsoft's coming. And it's like, I didn't even know they called them server farms back then. Okay, I'm a farmer. Like I grew up on a farm in El Salvador. My dad had potatoes and stuff and onions. And so I was like, server farm, that's just crazy. I don't even know what it means. I knew what Microsoft was because I used Microsoft products. I had a Hotmail account, at the time. But I didn't know what a server farm was. I didn't even know how it was built, and I didn't know what was required for that. And to be honest, I don't even think Microsoft did. This was their very first site ever in the world that they built in Quincy. And Matt got to work on it, I believe. He was an apprentice for that site. And so they're built, very different. It was actually, it looked like one of my husband and I have some CA storages for apples It's actually what it looked like. It looked like big tip up concrete panels, and that was the original way that we built. That has changed a lot over you could probably go into that more, and so could Ryan. I think as they evolved, they're always becoming more efficient. We're always looking for ways that we can improve on how we're doing things, and making sure that we do care about the resources, and that's really important to me too, as a farmer's wife and somebody that has lived in the Columbia Basin my whole life, making sure that that we're accountable for the resources that we all take for granted here. So and I'm proud to work for a company that also does that. But it's that was like at the beginning, and then Microsoft broke ground in May of 2026. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary here of putting that shovel in the ground in Quincy. And then 4 months later, Yahoo broke ground on their site in August of 2006. And the amount of construction workers that we had in our town, every single thing, every hotel room, every RV, every camp spot was taken, and we couldn't find enough. And I used to joke that I was going to have adopt a construction worker rally in downtown Quincy and see if we could start adopting. I think there was a couple thousand at one point.
Oh, yeah.
Between those two sites. And for our little town at the time was 5,500 people. So you have to know that Quincy was small. So it was a blessing in disguise. And I'm not just saying that because I work for a data center. My heart, anybody that knows me, I mean, Representative, I want to say Alex because he's my friend, but Representative Ibarra, has known me for a long time. I mean, I'm not going anywhere. When I'm no longer working for Microsoft, I will still be living in the Quincy area. That's where my roots are. So I take this job really serious of making sure that we're asking the right questions and that I'm holding the company that I work for accountable. And when I look back now, 20 years, it is amazing. It's not theoretical anymore. It's not, well, I wonder if a data center comes, what we're going to see, or how it's going to affect our community, or, will we have water? Will we use all of this? It's proven. We've had 20 years here, and we've seen what we've done, what we could have done better, and we've improved on that. And it's just a constant growth, and now it's a evolution, I guess. The next site we build better, we get better, we go back, fix things that maybe we needed fixed. We know that our sites, we used more water. So we invested $42 million in the very first of its kind water reuse for the city, and then donated it to the city of Quincy so that we could change the water use. So it's about, doing the right thing and having a community that holds you to do the right thing. So I don't know, do you want?
Okay, no, that's great. So Ryan, as time has flown by, the need for data centers have increased. I think I saw some number, there's 5,000 in the US. There's a lot of data centers here. What does the data centers in Washington State, what do they primarily do? Is there an easy way to say that? And then what does the future look like for data centers? I mean, obviously AI was a big driver behind Ken and Elt's report, but what are the data centers we have now? What are they?
Okay, well, speaking of AI, I think, I like to look at the big picture and ask questions like, why are we here today? And we're here today because of AI, because ChatGPT became a household name in 2023. That's why data centers are a topic of discussion at dinner tables across America. Before that, data centers were, like Lisa was talking about, nondescript buildings. People didn't really know they were there. People didn't care about them. People didn't think about them. And we just quietly operated and slowly built out. And kept the internet running, right? So that's what most of Washington State's data centers are doing, and that's the most of the history of data centers in Washington State is about AI, right? I don't, to my knowledge, there haven't been any really hyperscale AI facilities built in Washington yet. Maybe there's some that are proposed, but the data centers in Washington are enterprise data centers supporting enterprise businesses in all verticals across the economy, all kinds of different businesses from banks and financial, companies to hospitals and healthcare networks and all kinds of internet stuff, e-commerce, cloud computing, entertainment like streaming and gaming and all that. Uh, Airlines. I mean, like everything, right? Everything. Every business needs a data center in one way or another, right? You can't really run a business anymore without a data center. So that's what Washington's data centers are supporting. Businesses that need a data center facility to run their back of house applications, all their digital infrastructure, their customer facing infrastructure, all of that, right? The reason why they're in data centers now and not in little closets in their office buildings, because that's how it used to be, right? In the 90s, early 2000s, there's still a digital economy back then, but data centers were dispersed. They were in office buildings, they were in basements, they were small, they were inefficient. Bringing them into big facilities like we build now has many advantages from bringing the cost down, being more efficient. It increases scalability. It increases or it helps with security, both from physical security standpoint and cybersecurity. Like the updates that roll out, right? Any of your social media site, your Microsoft, right, will roll out an update improving security. They couldn't do that if it weren't for large data centers. Right? So and then not just supporting businesses, but supporting all of us, right? So if you think about, well, I mentioned the internet. So the internet does not work if it weren't for data centers. There's no internet, right? There's no cell phones. Your cell phone, so think about what people want in a cell phone. They want it to be small, they want it to be lightweight, and they want the battery to last a long time, right? So you want to minimize compute on your cell phone. Compute takes electricity, a lot of electricity. You want to offload that to the data center, right? So your battery lasts a long time. And so the cell phone is lightweight. So your cell phone is like a gateway to the data center. So if the data center went down, your phone goes into airplane mode. Okay, so all those apps that you use on your phone, they're running in data centers. So think about everything you do every day.
How do data centers today differ from an AI data center? I mean, are they just the same thing, just different purposes?
Different purposes, yes, although enterprises increasingly adopting AI, right? But when people think about an AI data center, they're thinking about the big labs, OpenAI and Anthropic and Google Gemini and all that, right? That are building like the big training, or training the AI on the data sets, right? Or what's called inference, where you're serving the customer end user with the AI, right? So training and inference data centers. That is kind of, I guess you could say, a different purpose, a different kind of end use.
But physically, are they the same?
AIs are bigger, right? Yeah, typically, right? I mean, that's what the industry is all about. Scale, right? In order to have the best AI model, you need scale. So that's why the AI labs are wanting more and more compute. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Whereas enterprise, enterprise is growing too, but I don't think it's growing gangbusters like that right now. So, but so scale is one difference, but other than that, we talked about air cooling versus liquid cooling. AI is run off of GPUs, which are very power dense, and they require liquid cooling. Whereas enterprise a lot of enterprise workloads you can still run with air. So it's there's a little bit of difference there, but even the enterprise data centers that we build now are hybrid, so you can both air and liquid. So not a whole lot of difference physically between enterprise data center and AI data center.
Lisa, did you want to add something?
I was just gonna say that I think a lot of, again, like a layman. So I think for the rest of you out here that maybe when you think of AI and you think of just like our cloud services, so many of them are being like just even some of the stuff like in the industry, like that my husband's in the Apple industry, you have data storage, but then you also have the ways that they're using AI in that. So like food safety standards that we have, and you think about every apple that you get has the SKU on it. And now, it's like they're using automation that's using AI at the warehouses that is looking at the apples with cameras. So they're using the AI to sort the apple. But even before it gets there, out in the field, my husband's using a phone where he's scanning the ticket. It geotags where it's at, like where it's at the bin. I mean, all of that. So there's the storage side, but it's being integrated using AI. So it's really both. I mean, wouldn't you say, Ryan? I mean, it's the businesses that are coming up with different ways of doing things to where, like I said, that apple could be traced all the way back and they can tell you, and even at the warehouse, they change every 15 minutes, like how that's running, the SKUs on the sides of the boxes so that they can trace it. And so you have to have data centers to store all this data. My husband would not, I don't even know where, in a barn. I mean, it's like that, we just don't have those capabilities. So, but it's not like just an AI data center or you're starting to see these implementations of using both.
So Matthew, as Lisa pointed out, you started as an apprentice 20 odd years ago. So you have some history with data centers also. What, can you tell us a little bit about your history over the last 20 years and then, some of the economic benefits to the region when it comes to data center construction?
Yeah. So, hi, Matthew. Matthew Ebner, Executive Director, Certified Electrical Workers of Washington. As Lisa pointed out, I was an apprentice back in 2006 on the first Microsoft build out. And that was the first really big project in Central Washington, probably since the New Deal. And it was, really pretty incredible, being out there, being part of it. A lot of apprentices, a lot of electricians were able to stack up a lot of hours on that project. I worked 2 years on that project, that specific place alone. So I kind of hate that term, construction jobs, as it's somehow less than, like what's the difference between a retail person working 2 years or a software developer doing 2 years with a company? I've been with the contractor for 5 years. So that's always kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But I think we've seen a lot of change in the physical appearances of data centers and the way they're built. There was a lot of experimentation, I would say, at first, pulling wire, doing bus bar instead of wire. There was even an incident where we had so much air handling AHUs in the building, we sucked down a wall. So, T-Mobile. That was a fun one.
No.
But then we tried these things called chicken coops that were like pre-made. Those didn't work out so well. But so there's been a lot of experimentation, trying to find the maximum efficiencies. And the industry's done a really good job. I think Microsoft's report that came out, what was that, last week? Showed the efficiency gains that the industry's made over the last 20 years. And as Ryan was saying, we're not building the AI, megalith projects that we're seeing over on the East Coast that are requiring a gigawatt. So we've been quietly doing this for 20 years, and now everybody's kind of in our business, and we're like, whoa, this isn't new, guys. We've been doing this a really long time. I think Representative Barr has done a great job of explaining, the Quincy Miracle. East Wenatchee, I'd say we're coming in at number 2 for data center density in the state of Washington, and we're proud of it. Our power prices are still incredibly low. So I would say Central Washington has done a really, really great job. The PUDs, the ports, the counties, the cities of managing these types of projects and data centers for the community. We have new high schools, we have new fire departments, new fire trucks. I mean, we've been able to capitalize on this.
Fire stations.
Yeah.
So what about the, you mentioned the jobs, and it's just a construction job, and it only lasts for 2 years.
Okay, this one will, okay, this stat will actually blow your mind. So in the year 2025 alone, in Washington and Oregon, so I represent IBW 112 over there on Edison Street. We have electricians with both Oregon electrical license as well as Washington state licenses. So between Washington and Oregon, year 2025, just the electricians, our wages was $1.2 billion. That's $1.2 billion of working class citizens' money going back into the local economy. That's 1 year. That is one craft. That's not taking into account the sheet metal workers, the plumbers, the pipe fitters, the iron workers, everybody else is also on those jobs, plus the jobs that are there continually.
So on that side of things, the jobs that are there continually, I understand that the equipment needs to get replaced.
Mhm.
I don't want to say fairly often, but often. Do you guys do that too? Is that your guys' job?
I've worked in 3 different data centers in one day. So we will bounce around wherever there's changes, upgrades, whatever the customer needs in their facility. But as far as work, there is a continual work all the time. This is great for our electrical contractors. It's no different than working in apple sheds. I've done a lot of controlled atmosphere before the data centers kicked off. It was basically agriculture, controlled atmosphere, cherry lines, apple lines, pear lines, etc. And then this added a whole new diversity to our energy economy, our workforce economy.
Okay.
I would say, I would just want to add to that is, one instance in Quincy is we have a company called Stetner Electric. And Mike Stetner was from Quincy and wanted to come back and see if he was doing schools back in the day. And he had a staff of 5 that he had had for about 5 years, I guess. And he thought, I'd really like to be able to get back and live in the town where I was raised. He came back, got a job as a sub to a sub to a sub, I think, down. He grew his business to 550 employees. That's what he topped out at. He's now at about 370. And I see them all the time at our sites doing upgrades, and they have, there's lots of work there. That right there, just in our community, for a small town like ours, to have a company that grew from 5 to 375, people go, where's all these houses coming from? That we have these huge housing projects in Quincy, and it's like, people go, we don't think data centers employ that many people. And it's like, you have to realize there is a huge trickle down effect. There is a lot of employees that are there. And I will give credit to the electricians. I mean, we have people that live in our community that came 20 years ago that thought they were there for 2 years, and they're still there. They all bought because they just moved from one project to another. So those are full-time jobs for them.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Ryan, on kind of along those same notes, besides building them and maintaining them and then replacing the equipment and things like that, there's still the operational side of the data centers. So when people say that there's not very many employees, not very many jobs are created, I think, and we've kind of seen we're on the construction and maintenance side of things. But what about the ongoing operational side of things? I mean, is it 4 people watching a bunch of panels and flipping switches once in a while? What's the ongoing operations look like?
There's that, yeah. So I got my start in the data center industry in operations. So I came up through operations and eventually becoming the operations manager for Quincy campus, which is our largest campus. So today, our Quincy campus employs 250 people. not including construction jobs. So just permanent, dedicated FTEs. We have about 250 people at campus. That's Savvy employees as well as our tenants, our customers. So, and then at our East Wenatchee facility, we have 150 people. So Savvy's two campuses in Central Washington have 400 full-time employees, not including construction. And Microsoft has even more than us. Right? So there are significant numbers of jobs. And the cool thing about these jobs is most of them don't require a bachelor's degree. Many of them don't even require an associate's degree. You can get an entry-level data center job straight out of high school now in Quincy and in Wenatchee because the data centers have worked with the high schools to build programs for juniors and seniors. So juniors and seniors can graduate with a high school diploma and having gotten some certificates just in their normal electives and to qualify for an entry-level position in a data center. So and Sadie has hired many actually from Quincy High School and Wenatchee and Eastmont High School. So and then you can take multiple routes. You can go to trade school and then find yourself in a data center. You can go to the military, and then lots of military jobs translate well into data centers. And what I like about our sites in Central Washington and all of our rural sites really is that people appreciate data center jobs in rural towns a lot more than they do in the big cities. So a data center job in a big city like Seattle or Ashburn, Virginia, which is the world's largest data center market, they're a dime a dozen, and there's a lot to do and there's a lot of opportunity in big cities. But in a small town like Quincy or even Wenatchee, and we're building in Eastern Oregon as well. So the data center jobs are exciting. There's maybe relatively new if you look at the big picture, right? And there's a low barrier to entry, and it's a stable, long-term, well-paying career, right? So it's easy for us to hire locally in rural communities. Honestly, it really is. And our retention is really high. Employee satisfaction is really high. I think that we have an easier time hiring in rural communities than we do in big cities. So.
Yeah, and some added context to what Ryan was saying. We started, the first Microsoft build out was in 06, but I think it was 2014, 2015. The Alcoa aluminum smelter in Wenatchee shuttered. It closed. And there was 350 workers there, and they all lost their jobs. They were done. We picked a lot of those guys up. A lot of them became electricians. A lot of them went into the data center. But that was 350 jobs for Alcoa. Nobody complained about Alcoa, really. Now, Sabi is already at 400 jobs. If I was to compare the megawatts that Alcoa was using at 350 megawatts, compared to what those two Sabi sites are using, I think we could probably also make the statistic that per megawatts, data centers provide more jobs than aluminum.
That's right. Yeah, I actually did that math when Alcoa was closing down. And I think this is public knowledge at this point. I don't mind talking about it because there's been so many Freedom of Information Act requests from the utilities. Our two sites are running at about 90 megawatts of load, of actual load on the grid right now.
Combined?
Yeah, combined. They're right now running at 90 megawatts with 400 employees. So that is more than what Alcoa had per megawatt.
Yeah.
And we obviously, that's not what you're hearing on the internet and on social medias. Yeah. Those are fairly large facilities, right? Not the biggest, but the makeup of the jobs is pretty interesting too. So you have a lot of IT. I think the most numerous job in the data center is probably the server hardware job. So you're working on the server hardware. You're replacing hard drives and loading servers and wiring everything up and working on the BIOS and the OS and stuff. Maybe you're working on applications too, but not a whole lot of that goes on in the data center. It's mostly hardware focused. And then you have the facility. So you have electrical maintenance and HVAC maintenance, and security and all the things that you need to run a mission critical facility. So there's a pretty wide variety of roles to play. And again, most of those don't require a college degree, pretty low barrier to entry.
Okay. So we've talked about now the economic benefits and the jobs that are created. And of course, there's always the property values looking at things too. But what about, other than construction and operations? And so Lisa, can you talk a little bit about some of the benefits of having a data center in your town or in your region? Quincy, for example.
Well, there's so many benefits. It's been, yeah. So, I don't, again, back to my whole thing about it was a farm, served farm. I didn't know that there would be so much value to that, a potato storage or a CA storage isn't valued that much. The value is actually in the product in it, and that product goes in and out. In a data center, those servers are locked down, and so that your value is so much more. Did not know that when we first were looking at these, to see just in Quincy alone, from 2005, I think we were at 858 million was our complete value of the Port District area. And now we're at 9.1 billion. So it's the taxes that are associated with these data centers have really been a game changer. And when I think about the burden, because I don't know if there's anybody in this room right now that thinks farming is killing it right now, because they're not. It's horrible. And the weight that is kind of lifted off the shoulders of people like my husband, and when they talk about, how they would support right now, our community, the fact that the data centers are paying 57% of our hospital and our school bond. We passed brand new bonds to build a brand new hospital that just opened, and a school that opened 5 years ago. I'm looking at Alex because he was on our school board at the time to help do that. But we have a beautiful new school, and that never would have been possible in our small farming town. It just wouldn't have. And to think about the hospital and to have a legacy. These are legacy projects that are happening for our community, and so you look at that. We have new public safety building. We have a new city hall. We have a new police station. We have a brand new aquatic center that just opened 3 weeks ago with new slides, new pools, new everything. They're building a new indoor arena that they're going to break ground in this fall that will have soccer and indoor soccer. The closest one is 2 hours away for this kind of stuff. Not just that, but the community, they were really great. I think our city did a great job. Is they're not just building it off the property taxes. They actually thought, we'll use the sales tax off construction to build these facilities, thinking that it was only going to be maybe 5 years of construction. Now, 20 years later, they kept having this, so they just kept building. And so they've repaired streets. They have new sidewalks everywhere. Just really, investing back, and then they'll use property tax to maintain these. So when you look at, all of those things, but I think that's a tax thing. But what I would say, more proud of is I think that the companies that the community allowed, because I think that, there's a choice there when you have somebody knocking at your door about who's going to be there. I think that the companies that have located there have also been just really good companies to have in your community. And I would look and I can look to Ryan here is, Microsoft has been super involved in our whole North Central region, investing in education platforms, into our community colleges, giving scholarships, creating programs, working, side by side on developing pathways. SABI has been amazing. We've partnered, we're on stuff together that we've done. Yahoo really involved as well. And I think that's really important too. Like, you know, stepping up and serving, and our employees are serving on committees, they're volunteering in the community, they're coaching. I mean, they're giving back. And I think that, I mean, on my old chamber background, that is super important. It's one thing to bring a company into town and say, okay, here, you know, we're going to get taxes off this. I think it's another, there's a whole nother level there to bring somebody in that actually invests and becomes. And I think our employees, all the way around, I know that the other employees from the other data centers, I would say that we have in our area have really built that up, and it's been kind of wonderful to see. And there's been 20 years of it. So, I mean, you can ask the community college. I mean, you know that. I'm looking at Stephen because we were on a board together at the college. But it's that is a byproduct as well.
So you say the data center are paying whatever, 45%, 45 or 55%?
57% of the
57%
hospital
of the hospital.
and the school district.
Is that
But
because of their property tax value that, you know, out of all the property, they have 57% of the property value in the area?
yes.
So they're
And
not
for-
writing a check. What about the aquatic center? How did that? I mean,
That was a vote, and that goes out to the whole regional area.
okay.
But again, Microsoft in Grant County. So, okay, I need to make sure that I'm differentiating this just for you, because there is Grant County as a whole. I can say Microsoft pays 14.9% of the total taxes for all of Grant County. So all of Grant County. Then there's the city of Quincy. In the city of Quincy, that's taking in the whole city. And then there's the hospital and port district. The port and hospital and school districts pretty much follow that same footprint. That's 57%. And then in the city, I don't even know. So there's like 3 different areas, and Amber and I are working on these numbers because they're all different, but it's a lot.
Significant.
It's significant, significant amount. And so I think it's been easier to vote for things as a citizen that lives there. And I think that's helped a lot of other community members to go, okay, we can afford this. We can afford to you know, invest in ourselves. And I, you know, laugh because we had a meeting recently, and Brad Smith was in town, the president of of Microsoft, and Kurt Morris, who's one of our port commissioners, said to him, you know, thank you. You realize that you pay 40% of the taxes for this area, and you don't even have a vote. And he just kind of laughed, and he said, but thank you, because you gave that vote to our people, and our residents have chosen to invest back in themselves with your vote. And I think that's the best thing about it, is when you have a company that comes in and that, you know, invests, and you're making, and also is doing the right things to be a good neighbor, and to be a good business in your community, which I think everybody.
Can I piggyback on that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know that before Microsoft moved into East Wenatchee, Sabi's campus, including our customers, because our customers pay personal property taxes on their service. Sabi's campuses were 15% of all the taxes in Douglas County. And yeah, now that Microsoft is there, data centers are a much larger portion than that. So it's really significant. And that's, you know, that's with the state sales tax incentive that we have that was recently, not entirely, but largely appealed. That's with this tax incentive in place. We're still paying that much in taxes, right? So it's very significant. And one thing else I noticed here is I also live where there are data centers. Like all 3 of us live where there are data centers. So I live in Wenatchee, and I've lived in Wenatchee for 15 years. So I think we have a good thing going in Central Washington with data centers. We clearly do. And you'll see, and not just to listen to the data center people, but you'll see broad support for data centers in Quincy and in Wenatchee, right? There might be a wrong way to do it. We're not in the business of doing it the wrong way. There's lots of different ways that data centers can interact with the communities that they're in. You hear stories, right? Other parts of the country, but I think that, data center developers, it's in their best interest to not come in with NDAs, and that largely doesn't happen anymore, to be transparent and to work with the community, right? It's in our best interest to be good neighbors, certainly.
So, and real quick, Matthew, on the city council for East Wenatchee, what is your take on it? I mean, take off your.
Right. Before I take the IBW hat off, one thing, piggybacking on what Ryan said, we've been doing this for 20-something years. My literal pension is tied to Savvy data centers. So the IBW owns stake in Savvy data centers. So the more work that we're doing is funding my retirement. Everybody, all the thousands of workers, it's funding their retirement as part of the NUBF plan. Now, from the city council position, like the noise complaint, there's no noise complaints. I don't know where that.
There's no noise.
Yeah, I don't get it. So
I can speak.
yeah, I mean,
more.
the county's done really well. I would say it has more of a direct impact than the city itself. I think we're trying to do more intermingling with the city. The Port Association, the Chelan Douglas Port, there's a whole TIF thing. But I mean, the money is definitely there. The community's been advancing as a whole. And we want to continue to see it grow.
All right, so I do want to shift gears here a little bit. Talk about energy requirements. Now, one of the focuses, one of our focuses with these meetings has been on energy. We've had, different discussions. We've talked about grid, and I understand that data centers use a massive amount of energy. Now, whether 45 megawatts is a massive amount of energy or not, I don't know. But Ryan or Lisa, can you guys address the energy requirements necessary for a data center, and how are those needs being addressed? We have what's going on now, and then we've got the future to look at. How are you guys meeting the energy requirements now?
So first of all, energy is a constraint for data centers. It certainly is. So I mean that's going back to not to go back to AI, but I guess I will. That's why those big developers are looking for places where there's energy, right? Places where they can get energy. We have what's called a secondary market in Central Washington. So it's not the big markets like Northern Virginia or Dallas, Texas, or the Bay Area or Chicago. Those are the big data center markets. We're much smaller than that. And we're actually one of the larger secondary markets in the country. However, we're not really growing that fast right now. The Washington secondary market is not really growing right now. Other secondary markets in the country are growing a lot faster than us. So, and that's mostly because we're constrained by power.
Okay.
Right? So, yeah. Okay. So, the utilities regulate us. Utilities throttle us, right? I work with 5 different utilities in the area. They're all public. Public utilities. 4 in Washington and 1 in Oregon. And I can tell you that they are all focused on keeping rates low for the residents and maintaining the long-term financial health of their districts. Right? That's what they're focused on. In some of these districts, data centers are seen as an asset because the ones that own their own dams, for example, have been able to gain more control of the output of their dams as the load in the county has grown, right? So that's one example of how data centers that can actually be beneficial to the utility provider. We also tend to pay more than our cost to serve, right? So the cost of service is a model that industries or the utilities use across the country to set rates and determine like which customer classes should pay what rate. And it is cheaper on a per megawatt basis to serve a data center than it is to serve residential, right? Because if you think about it, it's 1 meter. It's a big service, right? It's one piece of infrastructure, and then contrast that to houses that are spread out across the county, right? So typically, and at least how it was before, is that a data center might pay a lower rate than a residential, right? But that's because their cost to serve was significantly lower than it was to serve. That's kind of not really the case anymore. We're pretty used to paying more than the residential rate now. On BPA, a 10 megawatt load or above pays the NR rate, which is 3 times higher than what the public utilities that don't have their own dams, right, get received from BPA. A data center would pay 3 times higher costs than that. So there's many different ways, and I don't like not everyone's a fan of this word, but there's lots of different ways that data centers subsidize and help keep rates low for other customer classes. We also pay for our own infrastructure. So, and this has been the case for a very long time, decades really, where we'll pay 100% of our dedicated infrastructure. So our substation that serves our campus is typically dedicated to us, and we pay for that entirely. And then if there's any transmission upgrades that need to get done, which is often the case, we pay for those too. So, and then actually there's examples where that need and that dynamic has helped the utility get jobs done that they otherwise couldn't have gotten done, right? So I'm working with one in Washington where they have an old transmission line that's wooden poles, and it's a fire danger, and it's limited in capacity. And so our load request requires that line be upgraded. And now they have the opportunity to upgrade it to modern standards, steel structures. They're going to overbuild it too, right? They're not going to just build. They don't ever just build what the data center is asking for. They overbuild, right? And we're paying for that, right? So data centers fund just infrastructure improvements frequently.
And a caveat with that, in regards to data centers and energy consumption and the state of our grid, bottom line is we are already short on power. We are 9 gigs short. So statewide, this is not just a Washington state issue. This is a national issue. But I've had projects dying all over the state where there are no data centers. There was a large Department of the Navy contract that was looking in the Longview-Kelso area that couldn't get off the ground because they couldn't get 100 megawatts of power. There was a Intelco aluminum smelter up in Whatcom County, couldn't get off the ground. BPA couldn't get them the power. That project collapsed as well. Newport Steel was trying to site in Grant County, couldn't get the power. And the only one between like Intelco and the naval one and the hydrogen facility in Centralia, there's no data centers there. That's not a data center issue. It's the fact that Washington State is 50th out of 50 when it comes to putting up clean energy. So we're just falling behind the time, and our grid is
Antiquated grid.
Yeah.
yes. We need reconductoring. There are a lot of upgrades we need, and just for general economic development of all industries, data being part of that, we need to see massive investments in our both generation as well as capacity with all grid.
We do have a power problem. I mean, for sure. If you look at the U.S. Net generation over time, it's been pretty flat for the last 20 years. So I think going back to 2005 or so, our total electricity generation for the country has been flat. And that's changing now. Only in the last couple of years is it is starting to ramp up again. But we haven't really, because of energy efficiency standards, and everything's gotten more energy efficient, and probably lack of industrial activity. We didn't, for the last 20 years, we didn't need to bring on new generation. Now we do. We need to start building new generation again, like we did all those decades prior to.
So on that note, the lack of energy in Washington State, where do SMRs fit into that picture? Where does nuclear and SMRs fit into that picture here in Washington State and, I don't know, nationwide? Like, anybody want to answer that question?
Our nuclear guy here.
Well, first of all, I have to acknowledge that, you know, we are, how blessed we are, right, to have all the hydro that we have. And I look at it as a all the above solution, right? We need to maintain the hydro that we have, right? Because that's just legacy, low cost, non-emitting generation that we have to protect. And renewables are great, and we should be adding renewables. And actually Sabia is looking at, we're working with renewable developers right now, but that's not the answer because of its intermittency. Even when you add batteries, it's just not going to do it on its own. And then, you know, solar isn't great here. It's better, obviously, in the Sun Belt. It's better in Texas. Wind isn't great. All the good wind spots are kind of taken. You know, wind is better in the Great Plains, right? So, you know, you want to build solar where it's sunny. You want to build wind where it's windy, and then you need lots of transmission, lots and lots of transmission. So that's not a great solution. Again, it's supplemental, and it can help. It could certainly help. Renewables can certainly help, but it's not the solution. Natural gas is obviously easier to bring on. It's quick. It's cheap. It's baseload power as long as there's a natural gas supply. But you know, I don't think that that's really the way of the future because of its emissions factor. And so there's other things like geothermal, new advanced geothermal that some of the PUDs are investigating right now. But I am a huge fan of nuclear. I lately, after this this public sentiment issue that data centers have had for the last couple of years, it really made me think about the nuclear industry and the public sentiment that the nuclear industry has faced, going back to the early days in the 60s, but then it really ramped up in 79 when 3 Mile Island. I studied 3 Mile Island in school. Nobody died. Nobody died from 3 Mile Island. It was a problem, and the industry quickly learned from it and corrected course. And then Chernobyl, you know, scared everyone as well a few years later. And that, of course, could never happen in the U.S. It was a really different design, the old Soviet design. And now we have, you know, these advanced nuclear technologies that are even safer, right? So I remember explicitly thinking when I was 18, before I joined the Navy, I remember explicitly thinking that a nuclear power plant could explode like a nuclear bomb if something went wrong. I don't know why I thought that. I explicitly thought that. The more interesting question is why I still thought that it would be a good idea to work at one. That sounds like an exciting way to earn a paycheck, but yeah, I quickly learned that, you know, the physics are completely different. The U.S. has been operating, you know, small reactors all over the world in submarines and aircraft carriers since the 50s without a single accident, right? And even including 3 Mile Island, the nuclear industry, the commercial power, nuclear power industry in the U.S. Has killed less people than wind farms, right? So it is an incredibly safe industry, incredibly safe. I lived at a nuclear reactor for 6 years. I am not afraid of them because I know them, right? And it's when people don't understand something that they're understandably, rightly scared, right? And that's what's happening with data centers right now. People don't understand data centers, and I think people are a little bit afraid of AI. And so there's just a lot of overlap with the nuclear public perception and the data center public perception now. And what I'm worried about is that, because it's a little bit of a panic and hysteria happening right now. It's a little bit overblown. And there are outside forces coming in, right? Like now we're seeing people from Seattle coming into Central Washington to start stirring the pot and starting anti-data center groups. Not people that don't even live there, people from Seattle coming in and trying to turn people against data centers here. So I'm worried that the data center industry could face the same uphill challenges that the nuclear industry did in the 70s and 80s, and that really stifled development, right?
So I guess I kind of a bottom line question there. And Matthew, you mentioned projects around the state that have been shut down due to a lack of energy. And we do have, I think we have Benton PUD here, we've got Benton REA here, we have Big Bend, we've got Franklin PUD, Clinch here someplace from the city of Richland. You know, if there was a big project that they were like, okay, we're ready to start digging right now, the lack of energy, the lack of power would stifle that development tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what I'm hearing? I mean, is that kind of like the bottom line situation? I mean, because not only is it a matter of the power, but then there's the grid side of things.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys can build it from the property line to your facility, but getting it to the facility is a question. So, okay. So next question then is water and the cooling needs. Now, the PNNL report, you know, there's multiple ways. There's hybrid, there's water, there's straight up air. So let me ask you, are the data centers going to drain the Columbia River? Are we going to run out of water? What's the situation on the water usage?
I don't know whether it'll drain Columbia, but the framework encourages the stakeholders to view energy and water as interconnected long-term infrastructure issues rather than treating them as separate data center efficiency issues, right? And the reason is that total energy demand compared to the enterprise data centers with AI data centers, it's significant, you know, in orders of magnitude higher, right? So that is because the AI equipment, power conversion and distribution that is needed for electricity that's needed for that, plus the cooling needs, because you can't cool the AI data centers with air. You know, it's just not possible. So the framework essentially gives options for how to do, you know, direct to chip cooling as well as cooling based options for that. And then there are trade-offs when you're looking at energy and water, right? So there are certain cooling technologies like air-cooled technologies that might use more energy but no water. But then there are certain cooling technologies like water-based, chiller-based technologies that are far more efficient, use less energy, but then they use a lot of water. So there's a trade-off. So now, you know, it basically tells it's all location specific. So in a certain location, if there is more energy than water, then you would go one way. And in other locations where there is more water and less energy, then you would go another way to design these things. And then more importantly, you know, you don't design that just for tomorrow. Like you look at the life cycle of the data center, it should be, you know, decades. And look at the benefits and whatever costs that they have. And finally, you know, shared decision making, you know, the owners, the IT manufacturers, utilities, you know, policymakers, they all have a stake in this. So they have to come together to make a decision that is good for the community. So in short, the framework does not present, as I said earlier, a single energy or water solution. Instead, it provides a way to compare various options that we have to improve the capacity, reliability, efficiency, water availability, and all of that. So there are trade-offs, and then they're all location specific, and there's not a single answer. So it all depends.
I think that's a good point, because if we are looking at, areas with a lot of water and, but do we want to use, because I mean, the fact that we have a lot of water, does that really mean we have a lot of water? Because we do still have irrigation issues and things like that. And I think your point of everybody working together on this is critical. But the data centers here that are planned, and I don't know if you guys can answer this, because I don't know if you've seen the blueprints, but how has it evolved in Washington State?
I can talk about that.
Mhm.
So I think it's important to put things in context too, right? So the last reporting had countrywide, so across the U.S., data centers consumed 0.5% of the freshwater consumption in the country, less than golf courses.
Way less than golf course.
Yeah. So let's keep that in perspective. And the critics will say that we don't really know how much water data centers are using, but the municipalities do, the water districts do, and the city of Quincy does. And I met with the mayor recently and the public works staff, and they told us that data centers use 5% of the potable water, and that's probably because of the $40 million Microsoft invested in the recycling plant. But data centers use 5% of the water in Quincy. Food processors use 70%, and the residents use 25% of the water. So, and Savvy, that's our biggest campus in Quincy, and we are using water. We use a lot of evaporative cooling. It is location based, right? It's if you have a cool, dry climate, you might want to use evaporative cooling because it saves a lot of energy, right? Electricity. If you go in and if a data center is building in a place where there is just no water, you can run a data center without water. One of the common misconceptions that I'm hearing a lot is liquid cooling for AI workloads, right? That's a closed loop circuit, right? That's liquid to the chip. It's a closed loop. It does not consume water, right? Then there's on the facility side, there's different ways you can reject the heat, right? You can use water, you can use evaporative cooling, or you don't have to, right? You don't have to. Now, of course, if you don't use water, your peak energy loads in the hot summer days are going to be higher because you're using more air conditioning, right? So what the industry is kind of converging on right now that I'm seeing is going away from using water as a basis for your cooling. So in our early builds in Quincy, we use water as the basis of our cooling. So we use evaporative cooling spring through fall. It was very energy efficient, but they use water. On the flip side, going to pure no water whatsoever, pure electricity, that's going to cause really high peaks. That might be an issue for the utility, right, or the grid. So you want to have a kind of the sweet spot, which is using refrigeration as the basis of your cooling, and then using adiabatic pre-cooling or a little bit of water on the hot summer hours. So we're talking like less than 400 hours a year, or anytime it's over 90 or 95 degrees outside, you're using a little bit of water because it dramatically, for a relatively minor amount of water consumption, especially when you look across the year, it's dramatically bringing down your peak electrical loads. And that's, I think, what Microsoft is doing now. That's what we're doing now. And so as long as you have access to some water, again, looking at the grand scheme of things, it's not that much water.
Okay.
That's what we want to do, right?
So we are running out of time.
Okay.
I want to address the noise, visual impacts, and the quality of life issues. Knowing that data centers have evolved over the last 20 years. And does it sound like you're living next to a jet engine? What technology or how has technology evolved to overcome the claims that data centers are a noisy nuisance?
Can I take that one too? You probably want to talk about Quincy, but can I take a first crack at that? So okay, so legacy data centers would often put air conditioners on the rooftop. Okay, so if you think about a tall building with big industrial air conditioners on the rooftop, that could be a problem if it's next to houses, right? Sure, absolutely. That noise can carry, right? That's not what we're doing. That's not what we do anymore, right? So our new campuses, our bigger campuses, they'll have liquid cooled chillers. You could put these air conditioners inside the building. So what we're doing is we're putting them inside the building on the bottom floor. So all of the compressors, all the things that make a lot of noise are inside the building and you don't hear them outside at all. So you just have dry coolers. Maybe you have that mister system I talked about, but you just have fans outside and you can arrange those. First of all, maybe hopefully you're not building next to residential areas in the first place, but even if there are residences nearby, you can absolutely design these things now to where they don't make noise. They just and across the street you won't hear anything. The generators run 7 hours a year. 7 hours a year. That's it. And they're muffled and they're in almost soundproof enclosures. So they don't even make that much noise either when they're running. But they only run 7 hours a year and we only run them one at a time in daylight hours. Right? Just once a month for 30 minutes just for maintenance and exercise. So there are absolutely ways that we're building these things smartly to minimize the impact to the community.
Okay. So my last point here, is the land use, zoning, the loss of better development land, the opportunity costs of data centers. Local governments will worry about whether they're prime industrial land, farmland, land near the highways, utilities are being used, or could they be used for better long-term community projects, purposes. So beyond the construction, what measurable recurring economic value do data centers provide to local businesses beyond just the general statement about how they benefit the economy, they're good for the economy? I think I don't even know if we need to answer that because I think we've done a good job of demonstrating, that side of things. But what about, the idea of a community benefit agreement? That's something that's kind of new to me. The data centers, they've got to provide, I guess, something in return. Can you touch on those at all? I mean, is that a relatively new thing?
No, I mean, we did it when I worked at Yahoo. We had that up in Lockport, New York, where part of it is we were getting an incentive, so we needed to do a community development, and it was with the foundation. I honestly think it's company by company. I mean, if you're getting a company in or a developer of data centers or something where you really aren't sure who's going to be coming in, that might be in your best interest. I think when you have a company like Savvy, Microsoft, or something to where I mean, in 3 years' time, I've given back not in taxes, but just my investments into the community is around 5 million of different things that I'm investing in, whether that be the schools and the colleges and different programs and organizations. We really try to, as I say, try to spread the peanut butter and make sure it touches everything. So I give back the seniors and the veterans and to make sure that everybody is getting that. I think that, you have a choice. I guess if I was in your job, depending on what you do, ask questions, make sure that you're getting a company that you feel comfortable with and ask them about what they're going to be doing or how they're going to meet the needs of your water and your power. And I would say, not to go against what Ryan said, but I think 100%, he's right. But I would just ask you guys to quit picking winners and losers. When we talk about the water use in Quincy and I know that, combined at our worst, we were using under 8% of the potable water in Quincy. All of the data centers, our average is 5% of the total. And then you look at the agriculture industry, but I want my French fries clean. Like when I get them, and I want my bag of peas that I get that's frozen, I want them clean. So I realize that they're going to use more water, but I also think it's on all of us to try to help figure out how to reduce that. And I know we're gonna be sitting down and having some conversations in September to try to figure out how we can help our agriculture industry in managing that. And I also think that AI will solve a lot of these problems as well, is trying to figure out what is the best way, it's, to kind of manage, like you were saying, water or heat, or to come up with some of those. So I think people go, don't take the farm ground. Well, there's farmers that are begging people to take their farm ground right now because they're not making anything. They're going backwards. And so are they selling out? I mean, we have these discussions at our table, on most Sunday dinners. Are you selling out? Is it going to get better? Or is this, I mean, we're all using, and I use this term a lot, and I know Brian and I say it because we always get told they are using all the power. Those data centers, they use all the power. And I think we need to make that we are they. Every single one of us in this room. If you have a data center, if you have a phone, if you're going to the doctor, when you scan to go into Costco using your thing, when you bag your own groceries, when you get on, I mean, you're streaming Hulu, Netflix, watching Landman, whatever you're doing, you are using a data center. So we are they. And I think collectively, all of us in this room, myself, everybody, and our legislators in this room, we all need to be thinking about how we're going to solve some of these things, because we need to figure out data centers. We need our data centers. And if they're not going to go here, they're going to go someplace else. And it would be really great to have them in our state, where we get the jobs, we get the taxes here, and my family and my boys and can live and work in the state that they were born and raised in.
All right, so I'm gonna give Matthew the last word. You get the last word, and then it is noon straight up, and I know that we were supposed to be here till noon. I think we've touched on electricity, water, noise, land use, economic benefits, and the pros and cons. So why don't you wrap it up for us? That's
Okay.
not too much to ask.
One thing I would love to see would be a documentary called The Day Without a Data Center. Seriously, I think most humans are visual learners. I think this will probably help expand what we're talking about here in a meaningful way. There is a lot of fear in regards to AI, and data centers are getting caught in the blame of that. The electrical industry, electricians, the construction industry, we feel the benefits. We live on the benefits. People have raised their families on data centers, mine included. But I don't know if that is translating to everybody in the community in the state, or at least not even in the state, just within the communities. We're starting to see, pushback from within like Wenatchee, which is like where we're doing the data centers, and it's just kind of heartbreaking, really. But I do think, and this is where I'll break away a little bit from, my partners here, but we do need to increase the size of the table. So the table needs to get longer. The benefits on community benefit agreements, we need to find a better, more transparent way of showing the benefits to a teacher, to a nurse,
Yes.
to a XYZ. So that really the whole community is being able to collectively feel the benefits of data centers and AI. Because honestly, AI is not going away. China's not going to stop.
I
Europe's
think
not going to stop. Russia's
I
not
will
going to
let these
stop.
guys leave
AI is
for at
coming
least
whether
2
we
or 3
want it or
minutes. So if
not.
you guys want to ask them a
And
question,
I'd much rather
um,
have it.
we'll let them
have
stick
an
around here
American
for a little
AI
more. Don't
system
forget
that
the
we can regulate
PNNL
So
study is
we've got to find a
available
way to make this
by
actually
scanning
work
that.
for
And thank
all
you
of us.
guys. I really appreciate you guys coming. I think y'all broke down here from somewhere. So thank you guys. What happens next?